I see shame closing men off from who they really are. That use of porn is there because there's a void. There's something that isn't satiated within that man, and then he's reaching for this external stimulus to scratch that itch. We can train ourselves to actually parse apart the experience of orgasm from ejaculation. And once we do that, we can have an orgasm without an ejaculation. And if we have one orgasm, we can have another orgasm.
Welcome back to the Wild Lab, everybody. We are here today with my brother, my friend, my colleague, Ian Hawks. Ian is the co-founder of Men's Sexual Mastery Program. He's a sexual embodiment coach. He's really just an all-around badass dude, and I am honored to have him here with us today to talk about all things embodiment, talk about all things sex, and yeah, Ian, what's alive with you today, my brother?
Hey, Ned. Thank you. It's great to be here. Oh, what's alive with me right now is this season of spring that we're in. It's a beautiful day here. I'm up in Kelowna, British Columbia, and we've been blessed with a really gorgeous spring. The flowers are all popping. The sun is shining right now, and it's still nice and cool, cool in the mornings, but hot enough in the daytime to get down to the beach and just really enjoying this season, especially where I live here. And you might be able to relate to this, Ned. Fire season comes with summertime. So for me, spring is like really soaking in, enjoying every moment of spring, knowing that fire season is around the corner, and there's beauty and purpose in that as well. And spring, though, here for me is a very special time of year.
Yeah, absolutely. I was walking around the hills the other day, partly my land and partly, well, if anything, is my land, and partly some of the national forest that abuts it. Looking at all the lupins and all just the new growth of green grass and where deer have been grazing and bear have been grazing. And yeah, fire season is right around the corner. In fact, it is here in our neck of the woods. Are currently having probably about 30 miles away from here, our first little wild land fire, and hopefully it's seems like it's relatively contained. And as you said, however, it's always a presence out here in the West, whether you're in Canada or in California where I am. Yeah, it's here. So
The elements.
the elements are always around us, brother.
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to jump right in, man. I want to jump right into sexual embodiment, right? Because one of the things we talk a lot about on this podcast is how to be wild, how to connect with the deeper parts of ourselves, right? And I think for a lot of us men and women and all humans included, sex can be an area that carries a lot of shame. It can be an area that we are not necessarily connected to the deeper parts of ourselves. So maybe perhaps for those people who don't know, let's just give them a little bit primer. Like how, how do you define embodied sexuality? Like just let's start with the big picture, and then we can narrow it down a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Embodied sexuality to me is about bringing online the parts of ourselves that, as you spoke to, there can be shame around. There's a lot of cultural repression and suppression of our sexuality here in the West, especially. And embodied sexuality is, well, I'll put it this way. I look at sacred sexuality as my approach to embodied sexuality. It's bringing the sacred into this primal force of sexuality that is within and amongst us and around us all of the time. We live in, as Mark Gaffney puts it, a cosmoerotic planet where everything around us is making love with itself. The season of spring we're in right now, there are dozens and dozens of wildflowers showing their beautiful sexiness to the world right now as I walk the trails on the mountain I live on here, and the bees are coming in. And so everything is making love with other organisms in this world we live in. And so too are we as humans. That's what brought us here. Sexual energy is life force energy, and it's not going anywhere. And so I look at sacred sexuality as the full spectrum of the human experience. It's a synthesis of the full spectrum of the human experience where we're honoring the primal energies associated with the root, our sexuality, and the transcendent spiritual energies associated with the crown. And we're linking all of that to the integrative compassionate energies of the heart. And so
Mm-hmm.
in this way we're honoring the full spectrum, and the heart is what's at the center of it all, that
Mm-hmm.
grounds both the spiritual transcendent and the rooted primal um, sexual life force.
The heart is at the center of it all. Can you talk more about that? Unpack that a little bit for me. What do you mean by that? 'Cause we talk a lot about that in men's work and in a lot of other circles. Heart being heart centered, being led by your heart. What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you brought that up because it does often get talked about and can be
Yeah.
kind of glazed over as part of this new agey jargon or
Right.
um, but so for me to be clear, it's as I spoke to the compassionate energies of the heart, the loving energies of the heart. So with embodied sexuality, so in Tantra, for example, there is no right or wrong. It's
Mm,
everything is welcome. It's the full spectrum of experience. And there's a very wide spectrum of experience in sexuality.
mm,
And for me, what makes it embodied is, are we coming from the heart? And so we may choose to engage in some form of power dynamics or kink dynamics or something. I don't personally go deep into the realm of BDSM, but there are elements of it that are really valuable, I find, and exciting, and can add a lot of spark into relationship. And what's important when playing in these other realms is that the heart is there.
mm,
And what I mean by that is that there is compassion, there is empathy, there is connection between everyone who's involved. And that we are, as an individual, checking in with, is this in alignment? And this is where the heart being at the center of it all, there's, as I spoke to, the spiritual, which could be associated with above in the crown
mhm,
chakra, if we're looking at chakras, and there's the primal, which could be associated with the root.
mm,
And then there's the feminine, which is associated with the left side of the body in traditional Chinese medicine and other modalities, and the right is associated with the masculine. And so
mhm,
the heart being the center of it all, it's in the center of our body and our feet and our root on the earth in this primal energy, our crown and our head pointed to the heavens above in the transcendent spiritual, and the left being our feminine and the right being our masculine, and the center being the balancing point,
mm,
the axis point of it
mhm,
all.
mm,
And this bringing in the masculine and feminine polarity dynamics, this does not mean man and woman, of course. This
mhm,
is two energies that are alive within all of us and within all of life. And so another big part of embodied sexuality, as I choose to experience and teach it, is the balancing of our masculine and feminine, the
mm,
giving and receiving, the witnessing and the that which is witnessed,
mhm,
the awareness and the experience, the consciousness and the pleasure. It's this balancing point where something that's been really alive for me recently is this understanding experientially that the more that I honor the feminine within me and go
mhm,
into yin restorative practices and feeling my emotions and taking space to honor that feminine receptivity part of me, the more that my masculine qualities actually come online. I
mm,
look at it as so something like emotional processing and feeling into that. So going into a breathwork session where I might have a lot of big energies come up and be able to move through some of these emotions. That's me being in my feminine experience, feeling what's alive in me and allowing
mhm,
that to move through. And I come out the other side of that with so much spaciousness that
mm,
I can then move into the next part of my day, move into my relationship or any interactions I'm having with like a clear, open spaciousness that allows me to then be in my masculine, which one of the core ways that I've come to understand and experience being in my masculine is being in the spaciousness, being in
Mm,
awareness, witnessing and listening and observing, and this like holding space, which is another kind
mhm.
of new agey thing. But what does that mean to hold space? It means to be spacious.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for breaking down some actual practical ways in which men can be in their feminine a little bit more. Because I think oftentimes, as you've alluded to, in some of this, when we get into this talk about sex, when we get into the masculine, feminine, and polarity, we can tend to get a bit jargony, right? But I in your response, I heard a couple of things. One, I heard you talking about breath work, right? Breath work allowing you to get into the spaciousness, but also something you didn't say directly, but I've heard you say a number of times since we hit the record button, and I've also heard you say a number of times in many of our conversations before, is the importance of the natural world to your own sexuality, right? I hear you talking about the flowers. I hear you talking about, spring. I hear you talking about fires. And I'm I want to get into the polarities, and there's a couple other things I want to talk about there, but I am curious, right? If you see a connection between um, wild places, earth, soil, animals, plants, instinct cycles, in our relationships with sex, be they healthy relationships with sex or unhealthy relationships with sex. Because I know you as a man, not just as a co-founder of Men's Sexual Mastery Program and all the wonderful things that you are. You are also a man of the woods. You are also a man of nature. You are also a man who's deeply integrated into the wild. So, can you touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It is something that came through for me after I finished sharing before was actually to speak to embodiment.
Mm,
That word itself, embodied sexuality, what does that mean? Well, it means to be in our body.
mhm,
And what does it mean to be in our body? It means to feel,
mm,
to witness, to experience. And this is can be related to feminine qualities, as I was speaking to, of the experiencing of life. And so the earth is our sacred collective mother.
mhm,
And she is, from my perspective, this beautiful, radiant, feminine energy that is just asking to be witnessed, asking to be appreciated, asking to be loved, asking to be honored and revered and respected.
mhm,
And my relationship with the earth through spending a dozen years in the woods and as much free time as I can being out there and deeply connecting with the earth is a practice of being in appreciation of
mhm,
all that surrounds me. So stopping to smell the flowers actually and stopping to put a hand on a tree and feel
mhm,
her or him and feel that energy of the tree and connect with it. And part of my daily ritual morning practice is to go and sing outside to the trees, to the land. And this is one way that I choose to give back to the earth because
mhm,
she gives us everything
mhm,
and asks for nothing in return. And yet there is this element of irony of being in sacred reciprocity.
right.
And the
Yeah.
indigenous peoples of all different cultures understood this and they gave offerings, whether it was
Mhm,
physical food, flowers, or songs and prayers, reverence to the earth and being in that reciprocity and in that relationship. And so this is how I choose to be in relationship with the earth as well, is to every time I'm walking on her soil, stopping to smell her flowers, I'm there with my heart open and online, expressing gratitude and drinking in that beauty, which is all around us. We live in such a beautiful world.
mhm,
And this is, to bring it back to the polarity dynamics of masculine, feminine, this is a way that I can be in my masculine in relationship with the earth by witnessing her in her beauty
mhm,
and honoring that. And there's this polarity that occurs when I'm in that place where it creates a spark of life force, of
Mm-hmm.
pleasure, of like orgasmic energy, actually, that I can feel when I really drop into that space. I feel this weaving and reciprocity of energies where I'm being charged up by the earth. And I believe that there's an element of reciprocity there as well, where she's also receiving that energy and that attention from me. And so this is one way that we as men and as people can practice actually being in a sexual relationship
Mm.
just
What
by
do you
how we
mean by
move.
that? Yeah.
So by how we move through the world. So there, I like this, like how we do anything is how we do everything, right? And so
Yeah.
how we breathe is how we live. How we breathe is how we love. How we relate with our collective Earth Mother is how we relate with the feminine
Mm.
in interpersonal relationships as well. And so, in my experience, women that have been in relationship absolutely love it when I stop and hold stillness and presence and look at them, gazing into their eyes with awe and reverence, just appreciating and drinking in the beauty, and just letting them know how beautiful they are and how I love the way their body moves and how I love the way their hair is flowing over their shoulders at this point and the way that dress falls on the beautiful curves of her body. It's like to be there and just witness and appreciate and share in reciprocity. Like I see you and I fucking love you. I love what I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being you and sharing your beauty with the world. And that's one way that we as men can really amplify polarity in our romantic relationships is actually just to hold stillness and to be grounded, to be embodied in our breath. And the breath is the gateway to the body. So like stopping to slow down, breathe into the belly, and then appreciate the feminine form before us. And then in reciprocity, let her know. And it can be with our energy. We don't actually have to say anything. It can be with our touch. It could be with how we care and how we provide for. And it can be with words and compliments and words of affirmation. And we could get into the whole love languages that we all have.
Right.
Different
Sure.
people have different ways that they really like to receive.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the important thing is that we're there and we're grounded in ourselves and in our awareness and aware enough to actually appreciate what is before us.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. That is a beautiful answer, and I really appreciate you bringing in the sacred reciprocity because I think it's so important, and it's something that we that largely as a society goes unnoticed and doesn't happen on a daily basis. You know, a lot of times in my own work, and I say this all the time. I've said it before on this podcast, and I'll probably say it again. But there's different ways to move through the woods. If we're tracking or hunting or harvesting or just hiking, just enjoying, as you said, you know, the beauty of Pachamama and the beauty of Mother Nature and all that she has to offer us. There are ways of moving through the woods that I like to call them moving into the woods dick first and just, you know, fucking everything in your path, right? And taking what you think is yours and not giving anything back. And then, as you so beautifully put it, there are ways in moving in conversation, and there are ways in moving in sacred reciprocity with Mother Nature and with ourselves, with each other, right? With our partners and also with ourselves. Yes, absolutely. And I also really appreciate you bringing in, such a small thing, but I want to touch on it, breathing into our bellies. Um, because I know for myself and I know for some of the men I work with, that is such a simple thing, but it can be such a foreign concept because we think we breathe into our chest, our lungs are here, right? But can you talk a little bit more about like why do we breathe into our bellies? Like what is that? Because the first few times I heard that, and I may be going down to kindergarten level here for you, but like the first few times I heard that, it didn't make sense to me at all, right? Can you speak to that a little bit, like why we actually breathe into our bellies?
Yes, I would love to. I love I love this. I love the topic of the breath because, as I mentioned earlier, it's really at it's the foundation of everything.
Uh-huh.
And we go into this, the breath and how the breath relates to the nervous system and nervous system regulation. And these are also fundamental parts of being an embodied lover, of embodied sexuality is, again, being in our body, being in a regulated state in
Uh-huh.
our body. And the breath is the gateway to that. And to answer your question, the our diaphragm, which is our primary breathing muscle, it sits just below our rib cage. This thoracic diaphragm contracts and extends downwards as we inhale. And this is what fills our lungs with air. It's actually like our diaphragm moves downwards, and that creates a vacuum, which fills our lungs with air. And when the diaphragm descends, it creates this massage for all of our internal organs in our belly. And this is incredibly valuable for lymphatic drainage, for circulation, for our overall health and vitality. And this is how we are naturally supposed to breathe, diaphragmatic breathing. So when we say belly breathing, it's more about, like, of course, our the organs in our belly aren't actually filling with air. It's still our lungs. But by placing our attention and our intention to bring that breath down into the belly, what it does is it ensures that this thoracic diaphragm is going to extend downwards. And it's that descent of our diaphragm that creates this healthy, vital breath. And I can get into the relationship between that and our sex center and our pelvic floor, which is
Yeah,
also
please.
really important. Um,
Absolutely.
Okay. And before I do, I'll just mention that when we come into this world as babies, we're breathing into our bellies. If you watch a baby breathe, the belly is just rising and falling. If you watch your dog, for example, breathing when he's having a nice nap in the midday heat, his belly is going to be moving. And if you look at most adults in our culture breathe, it's actually the chest that's moving. And so what happens is we come into the world with a healthy, vital, normal, unhindered, unaltered breath into our belly. And through a series of life experiences, traumas, big T's and little T's, accidents, car accidents, stress, mm, challenges in the household, our own self-consciousness and the repression and the suppression and the shame around, especially like our sexuality, all serves to over time bring our breath higher and higher up into our body. And it is actually like arguably very related to the repression and the shame around sexuality that brings that breath away from our pelvic floor, away from our root. And it brings it higher and higher as we start to close off and guard ourselves and guard ourselves. And that breath for most people in our society, as I mentioned, is now just stuck in the chest and we're breathing really shallow. And there's a whole cascading series of detrimental health consequences that come from that, um, largely related to carbon dioxide levels in our blood and how that shifts our blood chemistry and our pH. And that creates a cascading effect of our sympathetic nervous system being online most of the time when
Mm,
really our parasympathetic nervous system, which is
right,
our social engagement, rest and digest, is where we want to be operating from at least 80% of the time.
right.
And so breathing into the belly to bring it back to the nervous system relationship engages the vagus nerve, which is this nerve that's largely, it's about 80% responsible for our parasympathetic nervous system, and it innervates all of our organs and moves through all of our midsection of our body. And so when our diaphragm descends with a healthy breath, it's creating a massage for our vagus nerve.
Uh-huh.
And this helps us drop into our parasympathetic nervous system. And conversely, if we're breathing shallow and into the chest, it's sending a signal to our body and to our mind that we're in a state of danger and stress.
Mm,
And this sends a cascade of hormones and sympathetic nervous system activation to our body, which
Mhm.
shuts down a lot of important systems in our body, like digestion and actually like sexual function as
Ah,
well.
yeah.
So,
So please, yes, let's get into the sexual function a little bit because I think that's it's yeah, please.
yeah. Yeah, and apologies for anyone that, is well versed in the nervous system and is just kinda rolling their eyes at that, but for a lot of people, it's new information and it's
Yeah,
really
it's
important, and
good
so
it's good to break it down, brother. I mean,
yeah.
I think yeah, there's a lot of you're right. There may be a lot of people listening that like, well, I already know all that stuff, but there's a ton of people who don't, right?
Mhm.
And so I think it's oftentimes good to break it down to the basic levels of why we're doing the thing. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Continue.
So to bring it to sexual function, the parasympathetic nervous system is related to our arousal. The ability for, so one of the effects with sympathetic nervous system coming online is our um, vasculature constricts, which means like
Uh-huh.
we don't have as much blood flow to our extremities. And one of the things that happens when our parasympathetic nervous system is online is we have vasodilation. And there's blood flow to our extremities, which allows us to become aroused. It's also, it can be related to this sense of safety.
Mm,
There's, if we are not safe, then historically, ancestrally, procreation and making love and making babies it's not going to be the top priority if
right.
our life is at risk.
Yeah.
So signaling to our body that we're safe is the first step in sexual arousal.
Hmm.
And this is especially true for women. This is part of
Hmm.
this idea of the orgasmic arc,
Hmm.
which is something my partner loves, and it's all rooted in safety, creating safety, and we can create safety internally for ourselves by how we breathe. This is signaling to our body that we are safe if we're breathing slow and deep, softly into our belly. So when when we're in a state of dysregulation and dysfunctional breathing and sympathetic nervous system activation, it's going to be really difficult to get aroused. It's going to be difficult for a man to have an erection. It's going to be difficult for a woman to get wet. And there are a lot of men out there suffering from erection challenges that they're supplementing with Viagra or Cialis or something, when really it's actually just nervous system.
Mm,
It actually can be traced back to like how this man is breathing
right.
and how he's
Right.
approaching a sexual experience. And so the other piece, the other side of this, the sympathetic nervous system is engaged when we are ejaculating.
Okay.
So there's this like the parasympathetic nervous system needs to be there for arousal and erection to occur. The
Right.
sympathetic nervous system, when that gets activated, it cascades into ejaculation.
Okay.
And so there's also a lot of men out there suffering from premature ejaculation.
Hmm.
And for many of these men, the solution to this is actually regulating the nervous system. There's so
Mm,
much excitement that can come when arousal builds, and it can quickly cascade a dysregulated nervous system into a sympathetic response where now this tension builds up and there's an ejaculation before it was intended.
hmm.
So bringing breath awareness and functional breathing into everything in life and especially into sex and lovemaking is a huge game changer. And so this element of belly breathing is something that, and actually like beyond belly breathing, what I teach men in the sexual space is pelvic floor breathing, breathing into the testicles, breathing into the perineum,
Hmm.
actually bringing that breath all the way down to the root. So we could do this together for a couple breaths if you'd like.
Sure. Let's do it
Any
right now, man. Yeah, absolutely.
anyone listening in, invite you to find a nice tall straight spine, upright position, and just empty your air out. Let your lungs come to empty. And then welcoming that inhalation in through the nose. I want you to imagine you're actually pushing out a bowel movement. So you're feeling expansion in the pelvic floor, and draw that breath all the way down into the perineum into the testicles, and then exhale, can let that go. And again, so the cue here is to actually flex, like not flexing, but expanding as though you're pushing out a bowel movement, and draw that breath right down into that space. And then exhale and let that go. So I'm curious, Ned, were you able to feel that in a couple of breaths there? This is probably an area that you're already well familiar with.
Absolutely. Well, it's an area I'm familiar with now. I will say these are areas that I struggled with in my past,
Mhm.
absolutely, for various reasons. But yes, this practice that you simple little practice, extremely powerful, and is something that I do many times throughout the day.
Mhm.
Often
It's
driving in a meeting,
yeah,
wherever. Like it's something I can do at any point. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and so that was what I guided there is would be called a reverse Kegel. So
Mhm.
Kegel, which many of us are likely familiar with, is the contraction of the pelvic floor, squeezing the muscle that's associated with holding in urine or holding in a bowel movement. And that's like the contraction, that's the yang, the flexion. It's going to build strength. And then what I just guided there, the expansion, which happens naturally on the inhalation. If we're breathing in a functional way with using our diaphragm, as the diaphragm descends downwards, our pelvic floor, which is also sometimes called a pelvic bowl, it also serves like a diaphragm right at the bottom of our pelvis. And as the thoracic diaphragm descends down, the pelvic bowl also descends down. And that's what we're feeling with that expansion as we draw the breath in. The pelvic bowl is expanding outwards. And then as we exhale, that's when there would normally be like a Kegel if you're doing a
Mhm.
strengthening exercise. So on the exhale, we could squeeze that as though we're holding in urine or pushing out the last few drops of urine or holding in a bowel movement and pulling the anus upwards. And that's the contraction. A lot of men are familiar with Kegels, and a lot of men train Kegels, and I see this becoming more and more popular. What I don't see a whole lot of is the reverse Kegel.
Right.
This is the yin. So if the Kegel's the yang, the reverse Kegel's the yin, and we need the balance of everything. We want to be strong and supple.
Hmm.
And so this, what can happen is like pelvic floor hypertension when we're just chronically
Yeah.
clenched up in the pelvic floor and like and in the butt and in the anus, right? This term like
Right.
tight ass. Oh, he's a tight ass. Like, yeah,
Right.
it's like a hypertonic pelvic floor.
Hmm.
And it's really common. And that creates lack of blood flow to
Hmm.
the genitals, which obviously creates a cascade of consequences in terms of our sexual function.
Sure.
And so, actually, breathing into the pelvic floor and creating this expansion is welcoming blood flow in, and it's also serving to calm our nervous system. And that's one little practice that we can partake in during sexual engagement, foreplay, and arousal. As that arousal is building, being conscious to breathe in and create that expansion in the pelvic floor, and then there's the flip side of that where we can create that contraction too, which creates the containment. And this is getting into there's ever so slightly more advanced sexual practices
Hmm.
of really like creating that containment where we can last as long as we want because the pelvic floor musculature is toned and conditioned enough to actually create like containment so that our sexual energy and our semen isn't going to leak out past that. But with that containment, we also need the softness and the suppleness within so that the energy can actually be circulating through the body. And it's the holding both of these polarities at the same
Hmm.
time simultaneously. And this is yeah, we have in men's sexual mastery, we have some really potent somatic practices that are all about this, holding both the masculine structure and the
Hmm.
containment while also being in the softness of the
Hmm.
feminine. And it's holding both of these at the same time that's in my experience and understanding the ticket to really transcendental ecstatic union.
Uh, Yeah, and thank you for that. And thank you for starting with the expansion as well, because I think you're right. I think a lot of us know Kegels. A lot of people practice Kegels, and I can say for myself and my own history, I practiced Kegels for a long time and saw very little benefits. And I think it was largely because, as you said, until I started practicing the expansion, I think I was just holding on and gripping and really stressing myself out in those ways. And you need both. Can I want to touch on something that you didn't say directly, but you've said indirectly a couple of times. You're talking about safety. You talked about women and being safe. I want to, and I think a lot of us can understand how that might work in a sexual partnership, in a sexual relationship. But I think something that's not talked about enough, or at least I don't hear enough, is safety for the men. Like what, and you spoke to it in your answer there. But I know that for some of the men that I work with, and myself included, it's been a revelation to me to recognize that, yeah, I too need safety in order to fully express my masculinity, especially in a sexual relationship, especially in the bedroom. And I think yeah, well, I don't want to say too much in my question. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, um, how, and I know we are all different. And so this answer is different for everyone, but how can men cultivate safe sexual relationships and feel safe in a sexual relationship so that they can fully embody their masculinity and so that they can do some of the things that um, last longer in bed, multi-orgasmic experiences and all of these things, which we can hopefully get to down the line. But yeah, if you could speak to that briefly.
Mhm. There's a couple different ways that I could see this going. There's the inner safety, like we were speaking to before, which I think is where it needs to begin. Um, so resourcing ourselves with our breath, with practices that allow us to come into our center, meditation, breath work, time in nature, spaciousness.
Yeah,
The masculine needs spaciousness to remember who he is and come into that center. And it's from that place that we can then choose how to engage with the world. And that's the other element of safety I'm sort of seeing here
yeah,
is how are we in relationship with the rest of the world? How is the rest of the world or our partner in relationship with us? And is that safe?
right.
And I think this is true really for all of us as humans, is it starts within. We resource ourselves and we find safety within. And that could mean just enough spaciousness to be able to check in with, is this a yes or is this a no for me?
Mhm.
So if for me, it's really, it's about creating the spaciousness so that I can listen to that inner guidance and take time to tune in to, is this a yes or is this a no?
Yeah.
And then how do we assert ourselves in the world with boundaries?
Mhm.
If something is not a yes, if something's a maybe, then it's not a yes, it's a no for the time being. And so
Right.
how do we then be able to express ourselves in a grounded, equanimous way that will allow us to create strong boundaries without like pushing people away if that's not our intention?
Yeah.
Um, and so this is also very related to being in a regulated state, acting from conscious choice rather than unconscious programming.
Yeah. Act Making a choice rather than operating from programming. Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to put it. Um, there's so many questions I really want to ask you. Uh, One of the things you've mentioned a couple of times that I'd like to circle back to is the idea of shame. and the weight that that carries in sexual relationships, specifically for men. Because if I'm not correct, or if I'm correct, you work um, solely with men, correct? Yes, yeah.
Yes.
So for men, what role does shame play in our sexual relationships? I'm gonna put it as simple as that, and you can answer it however you like.
I see shame. I see shame closing men off from who they really are.
Mm,
I see shame um, being a barrier to men engaging with women or in sex in the ways that they're really called to. I see
mm,
shame actually in our culture right now mm, being a massive separating force between men and women
mm,
at large. Um, so, and I see like shame goes so far beyond just the sexual realm,
1000%.
obviously, right? And I think shame is actually, I see it as a cloud that hangs over someone in that experience, and it inhibits their interaction with the rest of the world.
Mm,
It's very pervasive, and it's when it's for people that are attuned to it and aware of it, it's very palpable. I can see and feel shame on men now. I've worked with enough men and worked through my own shame enough to become familiar with it and what that energetic quality is and how it expresses. And I see it creating shells of men.
shells.
So yeah, it's a big obstacle, and
Yes.
it's a very low vibration, um, and there are there are solutions. You know, there's this thing like
Let's talk about them.
shame doesn't shame can only exist in the shadow. It's when it's brought to the light and witnessed, it tends to dissolve. And this is what brotherhood spaces like I facilitate can do for men is to create a space, a safe space where they can share what's heaviest on their heart and the shame that they may be carrying. And then in those brotherhood spaces, a lot of the time, it's actually just the understanding that, oh, I'm not alone in this.
Right.
This isn't just me. You know, is another big piece about shame is it's different from guilt in that it's this feeling of like if people knew about this thing, I wouldn't be lovable, or I'm not lovable because of this. Um, Rather than just remorseful for something that happened. It's heavier than that. And when this is why when we bring shame into the light and receive compassionate, steadfast love through that, it dissolves that shame.
Mm,
And
wow. Can you repeat that again, please? I just want to hear that one more time.
when we bring that which we're carrying shame about into the light and are witnessed in it by others who can hold us steady with love and acceptance, it dissolves that shame because it no longer can survive in the shadows.
Yeah, that's powerful, brother. Absolutely. And so, is part of the work that you're doing with the men's sexual mastery program, and part of the work you do as a sexual embodiment coach, consultant, or whatever word we want to use there. Um, how do you help men do you help men, and how do you help men dissolve that shame so that they can show up sexually the way that they want to, full,
Mhm.
embodied?
So for many men, the first step, as I mentioned, is allowing the space for it to be witnessed.
Yeah.
And then once we've got it out there, and it doesn't have to come up. You know, some men aren't going to go into the deepest recesses of their experience and their shame and their mind, and that's okay. What matters is, what do we do now? And so to me, I really actually look at shame as a indication where we're out of alignment. And that shame is there, same as like it's a pain teacher, right? It's there to show us that, hey, something requires changing here. And so by understanding where that shame is rooted, which whether it needs to be spoken or not isn't actually necessary. Any man could tell you, or he can tell himself what's in alignment and what isn't,
Right.
and especially when it comes to sexuality. And so, what we really work on is repatterning and actually creating an internal environment where those habits that would create shame, those habits that are out of alignment, no longer exist.
Mm,
and
yeah.
it's a process of filling the cup. We like to use this analogy where, so a really common source of shame, just to put it right out there, many
Yeah.
men sure can relate, is pornography.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And pornography is so pervasive, and it's becoming more and more so, and it's becoming more and more stimulating and
Mhm.
engaging and extreme. And it's only a matter of time until there's AI sex robots. There probably are already somewhere. I
I
believe
think there
there are.
already are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the
So
thing.
we can see where this trend is going. And this element of shame and pornography is only becoming more and more of a challenge
Mhm.
for our society and for men in particular. And so what we talk about, the analogy that we use, as I'll get to, is rather than trying to scoop the air out of the cup. So something like porn,
Yeah.
it's filling some kind of a need for men. It's attempting to fill some kind of a need, whether that's loneliness or connection or pleasure or
Mhm.
relaxation. Uh, that use of porn is there because there's a void. There's something that isn't satiated within that man, and then he's reaching for this external stimulus to scratch that itch. But it's actually not. It's not getting to the root of it. So it's an insatiable maneuver, right? It's
Right.
pornography. It's an illusion that it's creating connection. Our traditional approach to masturbation is an illusion that it's really creating deep pleasure. It's once we get to actually experience the pleasure potential that we have as men in our multi-orgasmic potential and prolonged states of orgasmic bliss, that 5 to 7 second genital sneeze, as David Data refers to it,
All right.
becomes like a kind of laughable excuse for pleasure, for true deep pleasure. So this is all to say that there's this void that's being filled by, we'll say, pornography or
Mhm.
whatever the habit is that's creating this sense of shame. And if we look at our cup as in that state, we're only partially filled with water, and there's this air. It's like porn that's filling the rest of the cup.
Mhm.
And rather than trying to scoop the air out of the cup, it just doesn't really work that well.
Not effective. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take some more water and actually
Mm.
fill the cup. And as that cup fills with the good stuff,
Mhm.
the rest, that air just, it leaves naturally.
No more need for porn.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so the practices that we work with and the shifts that we're able to guide men through in their own self pleasure solo cultivation practices, and then bringing that into a partnership if and when it's available for them, creates so much pleasure, so much fulfillment that those other habits just, there's no more space for them.
Yeah. And I heard you say And we've touched on this a couple of times, the multi-orgasmic man, the ability to what does that mean for people out there that like maybe talking to you like what are you talking about? Like um I, I ejaculated, that's it, that's my orgasm, it's over, it's done. Like what are you talking about, Ian? This is it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to some people.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. It didn't make a ton of sense to me when I first heard about it. And yet there was a part of me when I first heard about it that was like, no, that does, this feels true.
Hmm.
I don't comprehend it right now, but there's something in me that's resonating with
Uh-huh.
this. Um, so the simplest way I can explain it is there is a separation that can occur between orgasm and ejaculation.
Uh-huh.
And we as men in this culture have been trained and programmed and through our life experience come to understand that orgasm and ejaculation are one and the same. They happen simultaneously and one doesn't happen without the other.
Right.
Through a series of techniques, sexual technologies, as we like to call them, we can train ourselves to actually parse apart the experience of orgasm from ejaculation. And once we do that, we can have an orgasm without an ejaculation. And if we have one orgasm, we can have another orgasm without ejaculation. And in this way, we can have multitudes of orgasms during one lovemaking or solo cultivation session. And we may or may not choose to have an ejaculation at the end of that session. But what's most important is that we're able to be in this very heightened state of arousal and pleasure while regulating the nervous system and being in our body, remaining in the experience and in the presence of a grounded, um, regulated state. And through that, we're building our capacity to hold more energy and to hold more energy. And
Mhm.
becoming a multi orgasmic man is the byproduct of the accumulation of energy.
Mm. So men can have an orgasm without ejaculating.
Correct.
That's wild. No, yeah, it's I'll tell you a story about myself. The first time I experienced that, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't created in a space that I'd never experienced before. I hadn't even read about it, as a matter of fact. And through a very powerful relationship, it happened. And I thought to myself, what the hell? What the hell just happened? What is that? And how can I make it happen more often? Right. And since then, it's been a journey to get back to that. Right. Because I think, yeah, there's a lot of things involved that you touched on: safety and shame and polarities and sacred and all the things in there, and getting our bodies right, being one with our bodies. Because I think, what we talk about in this podcast a lot is wildness. Right. And what I'm hearing you say without necessarily saying it is the ejaculatory orgasm for men can be, I mean, in a way it's domestic, right? It domesticates us in a way, right?
Mhm.
And it's a tame way of experiencing a sexual relationship or a sexual experience. Whereas what you're referring to as, the possibility of multi orgasms, I mean, to me, that is wildness in its pure essence, right? I mean, because it's allowing us freedom, which I think is what we're all looking for in this world, I think, right? Um, and in order to do it, as you said, it requires us to be safe. It requires us to be whole inside of ourselves first, right? Like I remember when I was starting this journey, or long before I started this journey, I used to think of my cock as like something that was like separate from my body. Like it was this thing that was like I loved it. It was great, but it was this thing that was like on vacation, perhaps, down in Mexico, drinking margaritas, doing its thing. And then when I had a sexual relationship, it was like called it in for the big game, and it's like, all right, come on in, Dick. Like this is we're going to work now, and we're doing the thing, right? And lo and behold, when there were moments of moments where perhaps where I didn't perform to the ability that I wanted, even using that word perform, right? where I was carrying a lot of shame, it was always because of things in my life, right? It was because I wasn't in alignment with this, or I wasn't in alignment with that, or I was carrying shame in one area, or, all of these things. And so I really appreciate, the message that you've been putting out there about, like, look, it starts here first. Our dick isn't out on a spa vacation, right? It's connected to our body. It's connected to our soul. It's connected to our divine and primal presence, right?
and to
Which
and,
both live within us.
and to our
Yeah,
heart.
in our hearts. Well, and as you can see, that's where I'm pointing as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, I do that frequently. I'm talking about the heart and pointing to it, and yet talking about other things. So, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Thank you for that. I want to ask you. I want to respect your time, but I got a few more questions I want to get at. I just answered it in a way, but I'd like to hear your answer in your own way, even though you've talked around it in various ways. Is what what does it mean to be wild in our sexuality, to fully embody our wildness in our sexuality? What does that mean? What does that look like? What does it feel like? It's hard to put words to something like that, which is why I said feel, you know? Yeah.
What's coming to me is this vastness, this this immense expansion of pleasure and experience and raw primal truth.
Mm. Yes.
So yeah, I love that you're weaving the wild into this. I know this is the sort of
What we do around here, man.
core of your
Yeah.
podcast and your work and your life, and I really appreciate that. And it's a new sort of theme for me to weave in this way into sexuality, and yet of course it's so there.
Mhm.
It's that primal energy that we sort of started
Yeah.
the conversation with, that root, that earthly primal energy. And again, I'm reminded of the feminine.
Yeah. Primal and
And
divine.
pardon me.
Primal and the divine, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And this wildness of the feminine that we can experience in our world here, whether it's a hurricane coming through or the fires and the elements. And there there's so much power and beauty and wildness in the feminine,
Mhm.
and within our inner feminine as well, that fury
Yeah.
of rage that might come over a man. That's a feminine storm that's being
Totally.
expressed through, that wasn't contained
Right.
with the masculine. And in women, we of course can experience this wildness as well. And we at Men's Sexual Mastery, we look at sexual energy as having a feminine quality as well, and we're not the first people to to think of this or speak to it. But there is this wildness to sexual energy in itself, and
Yeah.
we know that it's people do wild and crazy things because of sexual urges,
Sure.
and there is this piece too, if we bring it back to the experience and pleasure, the sensual experience, being a feminine, being like having feminine qualities of this sensual erotic experience. Sexual energy as it builds is this potent well of feminine energy that
Mhm.
can create so much richness of experience and pleasure. And it requires in order to reach these really transcendental states, it requires the containment of the masculine to be in that storm of energy and
Mhm.
arousal and stimulation and wildness, and to ground it, to contain it, to be the banks of the river.
Yes.
um, and this is where there's in my experience, like in the sexual space, it's this balance, it's this wave, this undulating wave of like going into the feminine, the pleasure and experience. And it's this well of feeling sensations and pleasureful orgasmic energy that's building. And then before that gets too carried away to the point of ejaculation, I call myself back in, and I breathe and I slow down and I create containment and I integrate that. And then it creates a place where I'm ready to open up again to the wild, and the wild can start to build and build.
Yes.
And that's happening internally. And then externally, there's also this element of, if I'm in my feminine experience and that pleasure's really building, it can build to a place where I might start to dissociate or just detach in some way from my partner.
Uh,
And for her safety and for our connection, she needs to feel that I'm there with her.
right.
And so, in that same way, when I'm calling myself back into my masculine there, I'm also doing it for her and for us, for our
Mm,
connection, to make sure that, okay, I'm staying present. Our eyes are connected. Our breath is synced up, and we're there. And I know she can really feel me and feel that masculine safety and containment for her, so that she can also bubble up and
yeah.
overflow into her experience. And that's actually, I really think it comes from the feminine for me, in that experience. Like, that pleasure builds in me because it's building in her, and it's
Right.
constantly circulating through us. But it's really this dance for me of being in that wildness
Uh-huh.
and still creating safety and containment. Like when we
Mm,
go out into the bush for a week or a month at a time, like we're in that wildness, and
mhm.
without our fire to
Right.
gather around at night, without our tent to get into, like we might not make it, you know?
Yeah.
So we got to have that structure and that safety to be in that wildness, and to be able to really appreciate it and drink it in and bask in it and dance in it and play in it.
Oh, beautiful, brother. And I'm so glad that you use the analogy of the river, because it's often the one in my own workshops that I use, right? Because if we when we think of a river, we often think of it as, here the banks, and then the river, the water is in the middle of the banks. But that's not actually the way it works, right? Yes, there are the banks, and yes, they contain the water within the river somewhat, but there is a conversation between the soil and the water is always constantly ebbing and flowing this way, and always a little bit constantly flowing, ebbing and flowing that way. It's
Mm.
not just this rigid boundary in which, the river, it's constantly moving and changing and flowing. And I what I hear in your answer there is like, yeah, that's the relationship that's happening during that sexual experience between the masculine and feminine and between the two partners. So thank you for drawing that out, brother. It's a really beautiful way of putting it. Yeah.
I really love that you just brought that in, Ned. That's actually a new layer for me with that river and banks analogy.
Mhm.
Uh, the river is actually steering the banks.
Yeah.
We look
Yeah.
at any
It's
meandering river, and those cut banks are constantly eroding. And then we might get an oxbow lake because actually it's eroded so far. Someone like yourself, I'm sure you're familiar with that. For other people who might not know,
definitely.
but the banks of the river are moving and shifting over time, and it's actually the river that is steering that. And in this way, this is true too. I feel as men, like we're actually being guided by the feminine,
Mm,
whether that's our own internal feminine, our intuition, or the feminine in the world. Women are the women in our lives who I personally just wish to provide the best life I can for. And I find in my own experience, my partner and women in my life are such potent mirrors for me to see, like, where am I out of alignment? Where am I really in my dharma? Am I really in my mission and my purpose? Or
yeah.
how am I living in alignment right now? And there's this directional, like, guidance that I receive from the feminine, from within and without, that I think is really actually steering my life in ways. And it's from this place of deep listening. And this is another thing that we teach in men's
Mhm.
sexual mastery, is we're leading as men, but we're leading from a place of listening.
Yes.
And
Absolutely. Oh, the listening thing. We don't have a whole lot more time, and I can touch on that listening there's a whole podcast that should be about listening, and I know that there are. It's something that's very important in my life, and I talk about a lot. Um, I want to ask one last question here, Ian, and that is if you had advice for men out there, like one thing that they could do to take home, so that they could connect more fully with themselves sexually, with their partners sexually, like what would you tell them to do? Where can they start?
Hmm. Presence over performance.
Uh,
And for a man who's not in relationship right now, can bring that into his self-love practice. Um, Masturbation, you might call it. We reframe that because there's etymological baggage that comes with the term masturbation, and also has a lot of other implications, like normally implies ejaculation and often some form of visual stimulation. But presence over performance, in the sense, if you're working with yourself, be present with the feelings as they're coming up. Be present with the feelings rather than sending your energy and attention towards a screen or some visual stimulus outside of yourself. Come back, come inside, and actually leave that aside and be present with yourself. And rather than the performance aspect of this is to a means to an end of ejaculation, just be here to be present with the feelings. And then in relationship, she wants your presence. That's the greatest gift that we can give. And the performance that can come from a culture that's been indoctrinated with pornography and a bunch of distorted perceptions of what lovemaking is or what sex should look like. Um, just leave all that behind as much as you can. Maintain eye contact, sync up your breaths, and listen to her body.
Hmm.
Follow that lead, and be as present as you can. And that's going to, for a lot of women, be an experience unlike any they've had before. A man who's really, truly, fully present.
Presence over performance. Brother, thank you. Thank you for the presence that you bring, that you brought to this conversation, and that you bring to the world. Um, I really appreciate it, and I'm really excited to see you putting beautiful things, beautiful and powerful things out into the world, my brother. I think it's a true gift and a true honor that you're sharing with us all. So, how do people find you? How do people find you, Ian Hawks? How do they find the men's sexual mastery program? How can they get a hold of you? They want to work with you.
Yeah, let's go. I would love to meet you. If you're listening and you're interested, please reach out. You can find us at menssexualmastery.com. And you can find me on Instagram at Hawks Offerings. That's my last name, Hawks Offerings. I'm on there. Shoot me a message. I'd love to chat. And make your way to our website, fill in an application, and we'll be in touch to learn more how we can support and serve you.
Beautiful, brother. Thank you, Ian. And I think probably by the time this gets out, we are going to be together in Canada in our own ritual circle, doing our own thing. So I look forward to that. I look forward to sitting with you in circle in prayer and ceremony and brotherhood together in person. It's been too long, brother,
Yeah.
and we will see you soon. But until then, I'm going to be wandering around the rivers. I'm going to be tracking bear in the mountains. I'm going to be writing prose. So, to
Hmm.
everyone out there, I hope you all are doing the same and stay wild.
Hmm. Beautiful. Thank you, Ned. It was really fun dropping in with you. Looking forward to seeing you in Gambier.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for
Bye.
tuning in.
Thanks for listening to The Wild Lab. If today's conversation stirred something in you and you're ready to connect to your own inner wildness, then check us out online on Instagram at Step Into Your Wild, or go on over to www.stepintoyourwild.com to learn more about our coaching services and wilderness academies offered through Walker's School to Wild. Look, this is real work for real people who want to live with more clarity, more purpose, and more strength, but you don't have to figure it out alone. Let's walk this road together. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and stay wild.